Well, Lieutenant Colonel, Finland didn't start sharing a border with Russia yesterday. NATO emerged post-Cold War as a post-Cold War defense treaty. The idea was not that it was going to get bigger, if anything, that it was going to get smaller. Post-Soviet Union ceased to exist. Why do you think strategically now we're having these conversations? I hear you saying that there's kind of an emotional resonance here, a kind of emotional understanding for why they would be concerned. But we were given a lot of very kind of like psychosomatic reasons for the invasion before there was a more fulsome conversation about NATO expansion as precipitating some of these events. Do you think there are other strategic factors going on? Is this a game of chicken that the West is playing, saying, hey, you don't want NATO expansion, I'll give you NATO expansion? What do you think is going on here?
I'm sure that actually has an element of it in that many are saying, oh, okay, so you said NATO expansion wasn't this, then yeah, how about these two big ones here? And of course, there's still talk about potentially later on Ukraine joining NATO, which I think is entirely unhelpful and definitely not necessary or useful. Look, we have to understand also a fundamental reality and truth here. And NATO expansion, by the very declaration of NATO itself, can only be done if it improves the security of the entire alliance. Adding these two countries will not improve it. It will add burden to the remainder of them. But here's another really fundamental problem with all this that needs to be openly discussed out in the open, is that the Russians have shown that their tactical conventional capacity is far less than anybody thought. Ukraine has now caused extraordinary levels of damage to their ground forces, and it will be a decade or more before they even get back to where they were before 24 February, meaning that Russia is no threat to attack a single NATO country, much less to go into multiple ones, as some are hysterically claiming. There's no truth to that. There's no reality based on it when you look at the fundamentals. So there is no need to expand NATO. It is unfortunately primarily an emotional move right now. We just have to be honest and admit that.
Yeah, I mean, Sweden joining NATO, I don't think would really cause much. I mean, that's no different, I think, than, Germany or any of these other countries. I mean, they're not right up on Russia's border. But Finland, on the other hand, Helsinki to Moscow is about the same distance as Kiev to Moscow. And then you got St. Petersburg right there on the border of Finland. So, of course, Russia would have security concerns that I believe would be very legitimate. At the same time, obviously, Finland has their own security concerns. But where do you think this is really? Is this sort of the I don't know, military industrial complex saying, well, if we can't have Ukraine, then we need to swap it out for Finland, and we need to get more bases up on the Finnish border? I mean, what do you think is really truly driving this?
Well, I hope that's not the case, because that would be pretty bad if it was. You can't rule it out. I don't have any personal evidence to see that. But what I do think is there's a lot of is that it's there's this move to punish Russia everywhere you can, whether it's through sanctions, whether it's sending weapons and other help into Ukraine, or expanding NATO. And I think a lot of people are backing anything that Russia doesn't like, and they definitely don't like this one. And so I think it's just based on a punitive intent. But we have to be sober and straight about this and understand we got to think long term. We can't just think what's going on right now. This does not help us long term, and we should definitely not fast track this, because it won't. I don't believe it will work out to our advantage, and we need to make sure that we do what makes sense.